Thank you, Tom. I've fallen in love with this part of the country. I tell you what. Is this thing on? Can you hear? Does that help? Or I can just go like this and you can hear me too, right? That's not even on. Here's what, yeah, that's right. Very good. Here's what I want to do. I know there are a bunch of young writers or writers-to-be in here, and I'm just going to talk for 5 or 10 minutes about what happened to me until I started writing. Then I'm going to read a little bitty short story, then I'm going to read an essay or two on writing. That's okay. If anybody has to get up and use the bathroom, that ain't going to offend me. Get up and use the bathroom. I don't want to be known for someone who's got bladder problems. If I hadn't gone to see Singleton, I would have been okay. It all starts in Texas. My father was born in Dallas in 1925. He ran away from home in 1941 when his parents divorced. He joined the Merchant Marines out in California when he was 16 years old. Up until this point, he had played high school football on a football team that included Bobby Lane and Doak Walker, who were like Heisman Trophy winners and pro players and stuff. Well, that's what he told me. I don't see any photographs of this and all that, so that's for scholars to figure out. Then he got out of the Merchant Marines at 43 or so. He came back. His father had moved to somewhere in Oregon. My dad kind of finished high school somehow. He got accepted to SMU. This is his story. He went 3 days and he got drafted into World War II, which had kind of been going on, I guess. He scrammed. He was like a draft dodger, but he went back to the West Coast and got on another merchant ship because he had this thing called a Z card, his Coast Guard card. Got on the stupid ship, which got bombed up, all get out by, when it's down in the South Pacific, because a lot of merchant ships worked in World War II. When it came back to port in San Francisco, according to my father, the Army was waiting on him and said, do you want to go to Fort Leavenworth, the prison, or go ahead and do your stint in the Army? So he said, I'll do my stint in the Army. He got stationed in Beloit, Wisconsin. By this time, my mother from Michigan had gotten a job at Western Union, doing whatever they do. My dad, now a corporal, would go and be a courier to the Western Union somehow. He met my mom. They got married on January 1st, like kind of white trash people do, 1950. And then they drove down to Dallas and hung out and met is anybody here got married on January 1st? Sorry. I'm sorry. Drove down to Dallas, and they drove back west, and my father got back in the Merchant Marines, and then I was born in 1958. In 1960, he got cancer. They overexposed him to radiation in a hospital in San Francisco, and he had these big red, just scalding, burn maroon marks, color of that fan, all the way through his body. 16 years later, his intestines just kind of split apart from this, how he was compromised by this radiation. But before that, in 1963, he was back. He's cured of the cancer. He's back on a merchant ship. They're in a storm on the West Coast outside of Oregon. This boat ended up either going to either St. Helens or St. Helena, I forget, not the big, volcano thing. They're in a storm. He had to go down to the empty hold of the ship. They're going to get lumber up in Washington or whatever, and the ladder broke, and he fell 45 feet into the hold of the ship. 45 feet's, 4.5 stories, metal. He broke his hips, his back, 57 bones altogether. Took him into the closest port, put him in this little hospital. I was 5. Just turned 5. He was in that hospital for a long time. He was a morphine addict because they just started shooting him up with morphine for a long, long time, just saying this guy's going to die. He wouldn't die. They started doing traction. Over the years, he had a lot of artificial hip operations. On the day he died of lung cancer, even though he never smoked, but he's probably exposed to asbestos in the Merchant Marines, he could walk without limping. But there were a lot of how you all have somebody with a hip replacement. They've really gone. I have all my dad's old hip replacements on my desk because they take out one, hand it to us, you put in another one, a little bit morbid, but they make good paperweights, like big railroad things, railroad spikes. A lot of times I bring them to my school and I say, here, kid, hold this. And go, what is this? I say, my dad's old hip from his body. And I got kind of wimpy students. Okay, so then that's 63 and 65. Then he got off the morphine, but then he drank a whole lot because he's in pain, pain, pain. Meanwhile, my biological grandfather had moved to South Carolina and somehow started up a small textile supply company. My father's Social Security checks for being disabled were $180 a month. Hard to raise a family on $180 a month, even in 1965, right? So his father, my grandfather, said, come on back to South Carolina. I'll let you work here at my textile supply company, which makes these things called replacement aprons, but they're just belts that go on spinning frames that yarn runs on so it doesn't snag on metal. I'll pay you under the table. Illegal, but what the heck. My father said, okay. So we moved to South Carolina when I was 7. On the way, we stopped in Dallas, Texas to see Dad's mom, his biological mother, Nelta. Nelta, who's by this time been remarried and went by Nelta Sistrunk, played honky-tonk piano in a burlesque kind of operation owned by Jack Ruby, the man who killed Lee Harvey Oswald, the man who killed Kennedy. She was kind of an alcoholic. I could mention everybody on my family tree is an alcoholic, but that's another story. We got there, it was maybe August, 1st of August, and she said, little George, because my dad's name was George, never do that to your kid. The Easter Bunny came by here. I was 6, 6 or 7, a little kid, towhead. Easter Bunny came by here and left you something. So she handed me this chocolate Easter Bunny. You've seen that are hollow on the inside. Its head had been eaten off of it, and it had turned chalk white, as chocolate wants to do after a few months after Easter. And I was just a little kid, so I'm just standing there, and my dad, who's walking with crutches at this point, wham, he hit me a lot on the back of the hamstrings. Saying, like you would go up to a buddy and say, like, hey, Tom, how you doing? My dad said, that's a funny joke, isn't it? Wham! Ow! Ow! So what do you say? Thank you, Grandma. So then we moved to South Carolina. So my dad worked for his dad for, let's say, a year or so, and then they had a little bit of a falling out because Dad, like me, was hard-headed and said things like, this isn't the right way to do things. So Grandpa fired my father. So my father started up a business, even though he's disabled, so we had to put it in Mom's name. I didn't understand all this stuff at the time because I'm a little kid, you'll see later, worried about other things. So it was started up in Mom's name, and then after school, I would have to go to this little textile supply company in case the Social Security cops or whatever showed up. I'm not sure if they ever did or if it's just a paranoia. I know I was scared, so I'm working around these splitting machines that have a 13-foot, 10-inch band blade. If you get your finger stuck in there, you get cut off fingers easily. They cut leather into little strips if you need them 50 thousandths thick. You got this thing called a micrometer. So after school, I did a lot of this kind of thing. This isn't going to be like one of those Charles Dickens stories, I swear. I had a pretty good childhood. Grandpa got real mad that Dad started up a business to compete with him, and he tried to kidnap me when I was in the 7th grade. So that's one story, and then I wouldn't go out to his car because I knew, because my parents, this is a day before they put little kids' pictures on milk jugs, but we knew, don't go with Grandpa. He's drinking a little too much and he's angry. So I had that fear going on. Then one time Grandpa showed up and we're playing we had this good front yard to play football, so I got my friends over going, 29, 32, hey, wait, hold on, time out. Grandpa's got a pistol out at my dad's head, and my dad's out there, with his cane at this point, angry, and time out. So that kind of scarred me. And then about this time when I was 13, I started running. I started becoming a distance runner. And I started running like this, I bet I can run around the block, which was 0.6 of 1 mile. And then the next day, I'm going to see if I can run around 2 of those blocks, which was 1 mile. And just like Forrest Gump, and I'm not a lot smarter than Forrest Gump, later what I'm trying to tell you is anybody can be a writer, I just kept running and running and running. And right before I was 14, I was trying to run the length of a marathon, 26.2 miles, and I ran 20.6. My father, who now had undergone maybe just 1 or 2 hip operations, was following me in his VW Bug, putt, 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 which kind of irritates because, A, putt, 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 and I'm trying to concentrate running. Also, he's going 4 or 5 miles an hour, and people are blowing the horn and dodging. And it made it a lot more dangerous than it should have been.